the Metropolitan Police is set to allow frontline officers to use spit hoods to the outrage of civil rights groups. Currently, the Met only allows the use of the mesh covers on suspects in custody cells, while Commissioner Cressida Dick has previously pushed back against extending their use, saying they could escalate tensions. Now she claims they could be used by officers in dangerous situations to protect the public, victims and suspects. But civil liberties campaigners say the hoods are degrading, dehumanising and drive a wedge between police and the community. Well, to debate the police use of spit hoods, I'm now joined by former police officer Peter Kirkham and racial equality campaigner Lee Jasper. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Peter, if I could start with you then. So, isn't it a case of spit hoods are just common sense? You need to protect police officers, don't you? I
would certainly start from that position, and one thing I'd point out is that they've been used for more than 5 years around the country. The Met's one of the last forces that's taken them into use on the streets. They've been used in custody blocks in the Met for some time. There haven't been adverse incidents, there haven't been serious significant incidents, there haven't been concerns, bad outcomes or anything. They're pretty, as anything is risk-free, they're about as risk-free as they are, and they stop spitting and, more importantly, they stop biting.
Well, so there you go, Lee. I mean, they've been used in custody before. They're just trialling them on the streets. Isn't it a case of just common sense?
Well, I think it's a disproportionate use of almost a medieval piece of equipment. I have to remember, particularly in London, one of the most multicultural cities in the world, the prospect of black people having hoods put over them is so deeply resonant of our period during slavery and colonialism as to ring too many bells. There's already significant distrust between black communities in London and the Metropolitan Police Service, evidenced by the Met's own public attitudinal research that shows the African and Caribbean communities particularly have the lowest levels of confidence of any ethnic group in London in our police service. So I think we have to view this in a context of strained relations. We already know that the Met Police uses disproportionate force in violent arrests on black people. We know that, their figures tell us that, and yet they don't arrest and charge any more than they do the white suspects that they arrest. So this disproportionality of use of force, disproportionality of use of stop and search in the context of strained relations, this is just a provocative and unnecessary piece of militarisation of the police service.
Peter, do you think that? Is it provocative?
It's nonsense. Medieval, slavery, militarisation. This is the sort of hyperbole that the likes of Jasper come out with all the time. He earns a fortune out of keeping some sort of tension between police and communities. The likes of him are creating a problem because they earn money for it. They are not working to stop it. Why is he bringing race into this? This isn't just for black suspects. In fact, on my experience, I don't think we'll see that black suspects spitting or suspected of spitting much at all. It's always been white suspects in my experience. He knows the disproportionality statistics are deeply flawed, fundamentally flawed, and they don't say what he and others constantly make out they say, to the point where everybody now seems to think they're tablets of stone. They're flawed and they're shot through with sources of error.
Well, Lee, can I come back to you? I mean, I had a quick look through to see what kind of diseases are actually spread by spitting. I mean, some of them, it's pretty scary stuff. Hepatitis B and C, there's also strep bacteria, herpes, even flu virus. So in a case of, isn't this a practical measure and it's not really a political measure?
You're more likely to be hit by a meteor. I mean, let's be clear, these are not my figures. These are the figures that concur with what the Prime Minister said when she said there were burning injustices on the steps of 10 Downing Street, and referenced the fact that black youth are getting a raw deal from their policing. So these are not the rantings of hyperbolic Lee Jasper. We are in consensus and agreement with a Tory Prime Minister who has no agenda in this regard, and who we agree with 100%. The figures speak for themselves. you may wish to deny them, Peter. That is your choice to do so. But to describe them as you did is just absolute nonsense. The facts speak for themselves.
If you actually
yes,
knew...
of course officers need protection, and nobody is disagreeing with that. But to
No,
say
you
that these
You
hoods,
absolutely are.
To say that these hoods are in some way protecting police officers.
But Lee, but the figures themselves, the figures that we've got 95% of officers from all parts of the community. These are the officers themselves. They want these HUDs introduced because shouldn't we really be listening to our coppers?
He used to be a union man.
Well,
I'd have thought he'd have want protection for workers, and I'd have thought he'd have been a supporter of the Health and Safety at Work Act. If he doesn't want HUDs, how do we stop officers being spat at and bitten?
Well, we employ less snowflakes as police officers. At the end of the day, spitting is such rare. The idea that toughened police officers can't cope with a bit of spittle here and there is just absolutely nonsense. This is a provocative use of an unnecessary piece of equipment that's bound to further inflame already tense relations. You want a definition of anti-police prejudice?
There it is.
But I mean, Lee, seriously, the figures back it up. In the case of it, spitting
Me
is...
and Theresa May.
Spitting is a public health issue.
She's anti-police prejudice too.
Sorry?
Let's also have a look...
The Prime Minister has police prejudice.
Let's also have a look at some of the alternatives then, Lee. I mean, surely, in terms of something that is an element of restraint, that does protect public health, that is a benefit, something that the policemen want, isn't it better to have hoods than look at some of the alternatives we've seen from other police forces? Guns, tasers, rubber bullets. Surely a hood is a much lesser of many evils, yes?
They wouldn't normally be used for the same sorts of threats, but they're very low risk. They're designed specifically not to be a problem. They've been in use for 5 years without a problem. They're inventing something to have another pop at the police because they don't like the police. It's as simple as that.
So what do you think, Lee?
These hoods are not routinely deployed throughout the country at all. They're not standard modus operandi at all. And so it's some forces that are doing it and others are not. And I think that the context of whether you introduce these things has to be balanced against community relations, community tensions. Those are bad at the moment in London, and I don't believe introducing this semi-medieval piece of equipment that is a disproportionate use to the health concerns of police officers, of which I haven't heard the figures of how many people...
And language like that is really going to help the community understand what's happening. Hyperbole like that is a big part of the problem.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Peter Kirkham, Lee Jasper, thank you very much for your thoughts this evening. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.